All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, we were talking about the rand. That's all everybody's really talking about is the fallout on global stock markets, and particularly on South Africa's current account deficit have been cited as the driving factors behind a further plummet in the currency. So this morning, the local currency has been hovering around the 2086 mark against the pound after reaching a record low earlier this month, or yesterday actually. I think it hit its worst level, as well as against the dollar, breaking through 14 rand against the dollar. Economist Isaac Matshego from Nedbank Economic Unit is in our studios to try and educate us consumers as to what is going on with the markets and also what we can expect going further, because all of this is going to have an effect on, you name it, food prices, inflation rates, and other factors as well. Isaac, welcome. It's lovely to have you in studio, and on hopefully is not going to be so much as a Black Tuesday as yesterday was. Black Monday. What happened yesterday?
Well, you're talking of a Black Monday. It once happened in 1987, and what we saw yesterday was a global sell-off. Like you said, South Africa is not isolated. Actually, we're doing a bit better than other emerging market currencies. You look at the East Asian economies, you look at Brazil, we are a lot better. The rand so far this year is down about 12.5%. The Brazilian currency is down by 23% since the beginning of this year. So we are relatively okay, but of course, you know, the weaker rand will cause problems for us. We're thinking about inflation, particularly food prices, and also fuel prices, you know, looking at a month from now.
Yeah, we look at the currency today. It has improved since yesterday, and I suppose we should be grateful looking at those numbers, but I feel it hard to still be grateful looking at those numbers, because this is still going to hit us all hard when you look at these numbers that we're currently talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the fuel prices, for instance, for this month at least, we've got good over-recoveries. On Friday, the Department of Energy will announce, you know, the new prices starting Wednesday next week. We're expecting a cut of between 50 and 60 cents a litre when it comes to petrol. But looking at next month, if the rand continues to weaken and oil prices stabilize, that simply says that, you know, the month after we're going to see an increase in fuel prices. But we're just hoping that, you know, the rand will pull back from this level, because I'll tell you that, you know, the weakness of the rand is overdone at these levels. Yeah. It is just too weak. Once global markets stabilize, we should see the rand pulling back maybe to between 12.70 and 12.80 to the US dollar.
Where do you think is fair value for the rand? Where do you think the rand should be sitting? I know you say it's overdone, but what should we be trading?
You know, it's very difficult to talk about a fair value for the rand at the moment, because, you know, it's determined by two things. Number one, it's domestic factors, and you were talking about structural factors, you know, the current account deficit, the fiscal deficit, that tells us that, you know, the rand should be weak. And when you look at what's happening globally now, you know, the rand should be weakening. So it's very difficult to give you a fair value of the rand. But,
around the 10 rand mark to the dollar?
Well, yeah, between 10 and 12 would be fair value, let me say that, against the US dollar at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's turn our attention to Asian markets, because it almost feels that this is, we can't say it's entirely stemming from there, but it seems that this is really what's scaring the world. What is happening in Asia?
Well, it started on the 11th of August with the Chinese depreciating their currency, you know, 3 days in a row. And we saw this event spreading. Vietnam followed, and other currencies took a lot of beating. The rand also came under a lot of pressure. Brazil came under a lot of pressure. Russia also. So this was triggered by the actions of the Chinese. And global investors are just reducing their exposure to emerging markets, because they do not want to be carrying a lot of risk in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big thing, because I mean, South Africa, when it looks to China, I mean, it's a major trading partner of ours.
Absolutely, and with the slowdown in China, you know, it means that, you know, our exports to China, particularly the commodities that we export to China, iron ore, steel, and all those, could slow down a bit.
Just finally, when we talk to the person on the street, because that's really who we are talking to right now, I mean, there's one thing sitting at a trading desk and losing value on your shares. And I mean, I heard stories of what was happening on the Dow and in US markets, and the world's richest people were being hammered because of their investments. But here, back home, on the streets, how is it going to affect us, all this turmoil on the markets?
Inflation is the big problem. I mean, the rand is the biggest driver of inflation in South Africa. Food prices, fuel prices, that's where it's going to start hitting, the ordinary consumer out there.
Yeah. Recession?
Well, the risk of a recession is low at the moment in South Africa. I'll say that, we are in a low growth environment, but a contraction at this stage is, it's not likely, at least for this year, for next year, unless, there is this big shock to our economy, which we do not expect.
Yeah. It was quite incredible yesterday to actually see the Reserve Bank saying something. They never say anything. I mean, they really do step on the sidelines, and they like to let the currency be influenced by markets.
Absolutely.
Yesterday they opened their mouths and they said something. Talk us through this.
Yesterday was a crazy day. It was not an ordinary day. I mean, in the morning we saw the rand falling from around 13 to weaker than 14 and pulling back very quickly. It was a very volatile day. So the Reserve Bank had to come in and calm markets and say that, we are ready to act should the need arise. So it was the right thing to do.
Okay, so it was the right thing to do for them to say something. Let's look at today. Obviously, the first thing to do is wake up and look at how things are going today. Obviously, looking a bit calmer. We're seeing Asian markets actually on a positive footing today, taking cue from what happened in. Before we talk Asian markets, let's talk US markets, because I mean, yesterday we saw, I think it was the Dow that dropped 1,000 points at one stage. That's the biggest drop ever.
Yeah, the Dow, was down 1,000 points at one stage, pulled back and closed 600 points lower. I mean, it was a bloodbath. S&P 2 European markets were very quick, but encouragingly this morning, most Asian markets, other than the Chinese market, are up. So we are starting to see maybe we'll see some stability today, but we could go through this volatile phase for quite some time. It could last a couple of days. It could last a couple of weeks. But we do expect some stability, maybe towards year end.
Yeah. What do people do if you've got investments? Because I mean, that's my concern, and I think most people's concerns as well. Yeah. What do we do? Do you take your investments, put them in safer places? Is this a good time to invest in markets? Is it a bad time? Give us a little bit of advice here.
Well, if you're a long-term investor, this is not the time to sell. If you want to get into the market, maybe wait for some stability, because, markets are likely to fall further. And, it's difficult to time markets. But, if you are going to buy into this market, face it in. Buy small chunks and, put your money into the market in that way. But if you are a long-term investor, this is not the time to sell.
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. Isaac Matshego, thank you so much for talking to us, an economist with Nedbank Economics Unit. And I can tell you one thing, it just was a day yesterday that has been dubbed Black Monday. I'm sure for a very long time we will remember this. And the thing is that a lot of South Africans did find the funny side of it. And amazing, what was trending in Twitter was stronger than the rand. And people were saying, what things were stronger than the rand? And a couple of things that I'm looking at this. Ashley Madison's security system, stronger than the rand. And that's not a very good security system, is it? Here's another one. Leonardo DiCaprio's South African accent in Blood Diamond, stronger than the rand. Hashtag. Lesotho's Navy, hashtag, stronger than the rand. Oh, my goodness. It was very, very funny. Anyway, there are many more. And I'm sure a lot of you were actually involved in that conversation, too. The time now is 6:30.